So thank you for being here today. This is the AB 1234 Commissioner and Council training. So the objectives today. I'm sorry, is there any public comment before we begin? Okay. Hearing none, we'll move on. So the objectives of this training today are to familiar yourself with the laws that apply to you as public officials. And so when you know to ask questions. And then it's also to encourage you to think beyond legal restrictions. The law is the floor, right? Definitely not the ceiling. And then, of course, to help you comply with these legal requirements. It is a lot of information that we're going to cover today. I don't expect you to memorize everything and know it by heart. The point of this training, is to help you issue spot things. And I always say, like, have a spidey sense, that little tingling in your chest that you should ask a question or get more information when something comes up, really to help you identify what your conflicts are and areas that you should avoid or where you can make an adjustment as a public official. That's me. This is a cartoon version of me that is going to be joining us through this presentation. I also convinced Matt, our city attorney, to make a cartoon version of himself. So they will be guest starring. I hope sounds silly, but think of her as your Jiminy Cricket. When you go out into being a public official, associate the silly images with what the rules are. It'll help you remember what they are and help you to do the right thing, hopefully at least. So here's an overview of what we're going to cover today. A little bit of housekeeping, financial gains by public officials, personal advantages and perks, transparency and fair processes, the Brown Act, and public resources. I would like to say, too, the plan is to go for likely about an hour, take a break, and then take on the second hour. It's 2 hours in total for the training. If you have a question, I know that this is a little awkward, but if you could just come to the mic so that the folks on Zoom can hear you. We had issues last night where I ended up having to translate for everybody, and they missed the meat of some of the things that were being said here, and I don't want that to happen, right? I want to make sure that the things that you have to say are being captured in the meeting. So don't feel shy. Please come up. I don't bite. I want to hear your questions. I want to work through the information to make sure that we're all understanding it. And here we go. A little bit of housekeeping. And there's Matt. This one, I told him sorry, but this one cracked me up. Okay. These are Ojai's values. I hope this is not the first time that you're seeing this information. They are hung in the City Hall chambers, is I think what we call them, right when the public enters those side doors. Think of these in terms of values and not just minimum standards, right? So your actions as a public servant should be checked against this information and then the legal requirements as well. I'm not going to read them to you. There are a lot, but the high-level themes are transparency and open communications, respect, accountability, and engagement. And then laws are not the same as just ethics, right? So ethics laws is usually the starting point for how we analyze what to do or what not to do. And it's usually what you have to do, right? With ethics, just because it's legal doesn't mean it's ethical or the public perceives your actions to be ethical, right? We had a conversation last night where one of the commissioners was talking about getting tickets from the community and how the perception of the tickets sways grant funding that the Arts Commission gives out, right? So tickets are being given by the community to arts commissioners. They're attending those events, and then those folks end up getting grants. There's a gift limit, and the tickets are within the gift limit, and they're really a nominal value, but the public perception of what's happening is that the arts commissioners are being influenced by those tickets to give the grants, right? And there was a question of whether or not that's fair or transparent, right? And so with that, we had a conversation about the Arts Commission maybe reconsidering how it does those the grant program to ensure that the public feels that it's transparent and that it's fair and that there's an opportunity for everybody to have their projects considered equally, right? So that's a really good example of legal versus ethical.
And that was regarding the Arts Committee. How would that affect the whole City Council and all the other commissions in general?
So it's the same thing, right? So when you're taking tickets, and we can get into tickets a little bit later, but there's a few different ways that tickets can come to you, right? They can be given to the city, and then the city reports them out on a public-facing website. It can be a gift to you as a public official, or nope, that's it. Oh, the third one I'm thinking of. It's a nonprofit event. It's a fundraiser. You don't have to report that as a gift. Most tickets have to be reported as a gift. So you're either reporting it yourself as a commissioner, or you report it as the city reports it on your behalf. When those tickets come in, even if the city is the one giving them out, there could be a perception that your decisions are being influenced by that group. And I can tell you, Ojai I don't have to tell you this. Y'all live here, right? You're a very close-knit community. So I think you have to be mindful of how your actions by accepting tickets, for example, are perceived when that same group comes before you and you have to make a decision. Is it legal for you to take the tickets as long as it's under the gift limit? Sure. Is there a public perception that you're maybe doing something wrong and being influenced? More likely, yes, right? And from the feedback that I'm hearing, it's usually yes, right? So being thoughtful about those kinds of things in your actions. As a public official, there's a spotlight on the things that you do. It's part of the deal when we sign up to do this. We have very important jobs to serve this community, right? And so you have to be prepared to have your actions under a microscope. That's just part of the deal. Yes, Mr. Aikens, can you?
Yep, I'll turn to the mic. So I'm also involved in a nonprofit which does events, and it sounded like you just said that there may be an exception for tickets to a nonprofit event.
Yeah, so when
I never heard that before, and since I'm both.
Oh, sure. So when a nonprofit gives tickets to a public official, to a fundraising event, you don't have to report 2 tickets. As long as the nonprofit is the one giving it to the public official, it's for a fundraising purpose, and it's no more than 2 tickets.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and I can share after the meeting the FPPC is a handbook on gifts. It's quite long. It's a little legal, but it has all of these exceptions in it, broken down for you that we can't possibly cover today, right? Yeah, no problem. Yeah, please ask questions. Public service is different. We touched on this a little bit on the last side. So it's very easy for us as public officials to lose the public's trust. We always want to be in a space where we're building it and maintaining it. The way that you do that is knowing and understanding the laws and the rules that apply to you. Remember, the perception is reality. Even if it, like in the last example, even if you're not doing anything wrong, if the public thinks that you're doing wrong, they'll think that there's wrongdoing. And then they don't trust us, right? The whole point that we're here is to serve this community. If they don't trust us, then they won't come and tell us the things that are wrong, the services that they want, the things that need to be addressed, the policies that they want, the direction the city wants to go. Why are we here? Right? And so it's such a critical part that I think in the day-to-day of being a public official gets lost. And so keep that in mind as you move through your service, of avoiding wrongdoing and the appearance of wrongdoing, right? Sometimes you should recuse yourself, not because you're legally required to, because you should, because the public is going to perceive that what you did is wrong, even though it's legally not wrong, right? Always err on the side of caution. And then when in doubt, ask for help. I'm going to say this. If y'all ask Matt or I on the fly, if you have a conflict in what you should do, we're always going to err on the side of caution. We're always going to err on the side of following the law, recusing yourself, and doing what's in the best public interest and to protect the city, right? If there's even like a small scent that there might be a perception of wrongdoing or that it could be wrong under the law, we're going to tell you to recuse yourself, right? And the FPPC, by the way, who's the folks that you ask conflict questions, if you ask them, they're definitely, they give you the hardline answer, right? They don't find a way to make it work. So something to keep in mind as you move through your public service. Here's some tools, questions that you can ask yourself as you serve. So what decision, behavior, or course of action will best promote the public's interest in my leadership and that of the city? Would I want to read about my course of action on the front page of the OVN? I feel like that one is that if you only take one, that is the one, right? Because there's a ripple effect when that happens. It's easy to remember also. How do I want to be remembered as a public official? Would it make my family proud? Do you have that spidey sense, nagging feeling that you have a conflict? Should you contact the city attorney's office or the FPPC? So you are part of a whole. You are an individual in this community, and you always maintain your rights as an individual to provide your feedback and to give public comment. But if you're giving an opinion as a part of your commission, you got to vote on it, right? And so you do that by figuring out what the majority is on a decision, and then usually for commissions, sharing that decision with council. Majority dictates the opinion. Like I said, you always have a First Amendment right to do public comment to council as a commissioner. I recommend that when you do that, this is a very tight-knit community. Everybody knows everybody. They know you before you get to the mic. Tell them that you're speaking on behalf of yourself and not on behalf of the commission, to make it clear. The chair of the commission is automatically designated to speak on behalf of the commission. Y'all can vote on it too, to have someone else speak on their behalf, or the vice chair in their absence. So something to keep in mind. And then the chair can't speak on things that the commission hasn't voted on. You can't be a chair gone wild. You have to represent what your commission did. And same's true for the mayor, right? So how do you provide your opinion as a commission? So every commission except the Building Appeals Board is advisory to the city council. A lot of the commissions have special powers, maybe to approve permits, maybe to approve contracts, but all of them at their core, except for the Building Appeals Board that only hears appeals, is advisory to the council. So if you have an opinion, saying that opinion into the mic at your meeting isn't enough. Your body needs to agendize an issue and vote on it at your meeting to make a recommendation formally to council. So as a commission, to make a recommendation to council formally for anything. So like our city council. So the example I think I gave last night was tiny homes planning commission. One of the planning commissioners, this might be a little funny because it would be more appropriate to have direction from council, but or if planning saw something where there's a huge gap in the code and it needs to be changed and it's important, right? Like right now we're working on bringing our ADU laws up to compliance because I think as of right now they adopted a different ADU law. Like it's changing all of the time. So if they wanted to make a recommendation, say, we really feel it's important for the code to change in these areas to update it current to law, they would have to have an agenda item. The majority would have to agree on what that recommendation and the changes looked like, and then that would get transmitted to the city council. That's how you make a recommendation. Council may or may not consider the recommendation. and they might even change it. And that's part of how this goes. Council has the ability to do that. They were voted by the people of this city to make decisions on behalf of the city. I recommend that you don't get your feelings hurt when that happens or when it changes. As a person who has to bleed all over documents, it took me a very long time to get to this space that I think when we think about what we do as serving the public and the public is first rather than ourselves, it makes it easier to accept that we're receiving feedback from council and the community, and there's all these other avenues of input, and it's okay if it changes because the end result will have been something that we all worked on together, right? So don't get your feelings hurt when it happens. It just accept that it's possible that it will change, or it may not be a right now issue. Jurisdiction I came from, a commission had made a recommendation for a women's commission, women and girls. It took, this is an egregious example, it took 50 years for it to come to light because it wasn't important at the time. But you should say the hard things and get them in writing because somebody one day may pick it up and reconsider, hey, you know what? We should have done this. Or now's not the time because we have other priorities and we have to get these other things out of the way, but maybe at the beginning of next year, we can look at this, right? So something to be mindful of. And then if approved, council provides direction to the city manager to implement, and the city manager directs staff on how to implement council's direction. How to request a legal opinion. So you go through staff for everything you need, and then staff will escalate it to my office as appropriate, right? So we're in Ojai, this feels weird to talk about myself, but we're a contract, right? And we have to be mindful of how much money we spend on legal services. And that's why we have staff put in that position. If you have a conflict, it's unlikely that staff is going to manage that. They'll escalate it to our office and we can go from there. And then that last bullet point, Ojai is a very educated community. We have a lot of wonderful people here. Some of them are attorneys and some of them serve on commissions. I'm not going to get into the ethics of advising someone that's not your client, but as an attorney that lives in the city, works in the city, you are not authorized to give legal opinions on the dais or otherwise about city business. That's my job. That's Matt's job. And if you have concerns, you can escalate them to our office about things that are legal, but it's our job to give legal advice for the city. So with that too, as a commissioner or council member, you do not have the ability to direct staff. City of Ojai is a council manager form of government, or city manager form of government is another way to put it. That means that the city council has put authority into the city manager, Ben Harvey at the moment, right? To run the city and the day-to-day operations of the city. That means that you cannot direct staff as a body or as an individual to do things. They don't work for you. They work for the city manager. You also can't get involved in day-to-day operations of the city. So the budget, permits, planning stuff, public records, all of the things that make the city run, keeping the lights on at City Hall, those things are the city manager's responsibility. So the only real exception to this is the city council can authorize staff to work on something that's above and beyond what was approved in the last budget. But it is city manager's job to direct staff on how to do it and to deliver council's direction. And speaking about staff, don't attack them. Okay? You look like a bully, staff can't defend themselves, right? Especially in a public meeting. Staff can't defend themselves. It negatively impacts morale and contributes to a high staff turnover. Ben has done, and his team, a really excellent job of finding opportunities to make it appealing to work here in the city of Ojai. Don't be a commission that staff doesn't want to work for and that causes them to leave. That's really unfortunate. I can tell you the staff that work here are really amazing, They're some of my favorite people, hands down. I'm not just saying that. They really care about the city, and it might not feel like it sometimes when you're frustrated with council or things that are happening, but don't take it out on staff. They're doing what they've been directed to do. So they work for Ben, they don't work for you, right? So it also makes the city look incompetent. We hired these people, didn't we? You're an extension of the city. So you complaining about staff, it's an extension of you, whether you were involved or not. And then questions about staff's performance, address them with the city manager's office directly behind closed doors, or it goes in closed session in some instances. And speaking of attacks, don't attack each other either. So by treating each other with respect, and by each other, I mean really the public and the other commissioners or council members on your body, it encouraged teamwork on community issues. A respectful dialogue fosters collaboration and communication when we're all trying to talk over each other, when we're not carrying respect in the conversations. It's really hard to be collaborative and think clearly when you're angry. It maintains the residents' confidence in leadership. So being civil helps maintain our public's trust in government. When you attack each other, it erodes the residents' faith in you as community leaders. Focus on the issues. So set a positive example. Keep discussion centered on community needs. We're here to serve the community. Attacking each other shifts away from that, right? We're making it about people. We're not making it about serving the community and making important decisions for that. Setting a positive example for constituents. You teach people how to treat you. Human beings copy each other. I've seen it time and time again, where we have maybe a chair or a mayor who really likes to stir the pot. It turns the council into a pot stirrer, right? Or we have one commissioner who that the bad apple spoils the bunch, right? Where it contaminates the example, and then the public thinks it's okay to in turn speak to you that way. And it's this really toxic cycle of speaking to each other outside of the values that Ojai has set, the respect, the open and transparent communication, right? So the other thing is why would anybody want to join a commission or the council in this city if y'all are being terrible to each other, right? Why would you want to take, it feels like me when I think about joining my HOA board. I don't have the energy to argue on top of the arguing I already do for a living, right? For free, right? As a service to my building. It's the same here. And then with that, why would the youth, why would the younger people in this community want to participate when it looks stressful, you're not treating each other with respect? It's very much a trickle-down effect. This meme makes me think of that. I can tell you, in the short time I've worked here, y'all care about this community a lot. You care about each other a lot, even though it doesn't feel like it sometimes. So that what I hear when I'm being yelled at is people caring loudly, right? A lot of times your opinions are so ingrained in who you are that we get loud because we feel like we're not being heard, and that's not the way forward, right? So fostering an understanding and productive solutions gets us to yes. Otherwise, we're not making decisions for the community, we're not moving things forward, and we're not being productive. And it enhances your credibility and effectiveness with the community. The community is more likely to trust us if we're trusting each other and working collaboratively. It trickles down from the top. Larry looks like he's getting ready for public comment. Okay. Do you have a question?
Yes.
Okay.
I am a bit older than you.
Yes.
Okay. And have seen.
Sorry, that was mean.
No, I understand perfectly.
I'm recognizing your wisdom. Yes.
Maybe. Not sometimes. That regardless of all the angst and aggravation and discord in city councils or everywhere, right? Stuff gets done, right? And that's the point. I mean, somehow people manage to overcome all that nonsense.
Yeah, but imagine how much more we could do if
or worse.
yeah, that's true.
See, that's
That's
There's a
true.
reason why people say no.
Yeah, that's true.
Anyway, but that's so. This creates more compatibility.
Yeah. We're trying to get to yes. We're trying to do great things in this community. This is a special place. I think all of us can acknowledge that. And so doing the right things to make sure it stays special and decisions to make the community be its ultimate potential of what it can be, right? Conflicts of interest. Now we're getting into the meat of it. So we're going to cover all the different kinds of conflicts and the miscellaneous laws that conflict wasn't really the right word for it. So the key principles of conflicts of interest. The possibility of you financially benefiting or losing something can't be the reason that you make decisions. And these laws are designed to promote ethical values of responsibility and trustworthiness. As a public servant, you have a responsibility to always act in the public's best interest, not your own. So we have to set that aside when you take office and when you serve in office. Has anybody heard of Bell? City of Bell? Yeah. So the City of Bell is actually the reason that a lot of our conflicts of interest and ethics laws have been strengthened. So we'll watch a quick video on this. Small city with about 34,000 people. Although telling Ojai it's a small city is very silly because you're a very small city. Voter turnout was in the single digits. Lower socioeconomic immigrant families lived in this community. Starting salary was about $78,000. Over time, their city administrator, which is their version of Ben, city manager, collected about $800,000 in salary. His annual increases were 12%, which is a lot of money. And his salary, they'll mention in the video, was almost 2 times of what the president makes. So there was criminal prosecution of some of the folks in the scheme. And I think Rizzo and Spacia, which is his assistant, had to repay nearly $9 million.
Taxpayer outrage and one answer. Police in Bell, California fanned out today, arresting the mayor and 7 other city officials charged with bilking struggling taxpayers, salaries in the stratosphere. It started with anger and now criminal charges. Here's Mike Van Friend.
A raucous crowd gathered outside City Hall as word spread that officials were being rounded up and arrested. One even had his door broken down by a police battering ram.
They used the tax dollars collected from the hardworking citizens of Bell as their own piggy bank, which they then looted at will.
Former city manager Robert Rizzo made nearly $800,000 a year, almost twice what the president makes. City council members were paid nearly $8,000 a month for attending meetings that either never took place or lasted only minutes. The district attorney said that is fraud.
This, needless to say, is corruption on steroids.
The 40,000 residents of Bell had been paying enormous property taxes and sewer fees. And today we're thrilled to see those in charge thrown in jail.
I'm ecstatic. I'm glad. It's about time they caught them.
They were not arrested for simply making enormous amounts of money.
Getting paid $1 zillion a year is not illegal in the state of California unless you do it by illicit and illegal means.
Officials say private citizens need to do a better job of being their own watchdogs.
These officials thought they could get away with it, and they did get away with it for a number of years, and now finally people are looking at it and saying enough is enough.
The district attorney says the 8 arrested today face significant jail sentences. This is the biggest corruption scandal to be prosecuted in California in 3 decades.
So, very definite example of what not to do and how quickly you can lose the public's trust and not being good stewards of the public's money. Really upsetting and really damaged the community, but Bell has actually turned out to be a beacon in ethics from that incident, which is, like, I guess, a silver lining. It's really unfortunate that it took that incident to make that happen. So the Political Reform Act was one of the areas and related that got strengthened. This law has been in place since Watergate and was adopted in response to the Watergate scandal. So as a public official, you may not participate in, influence a government decision that you'll have a foreseeable and material financial effect on you, your immediate family, and any of your economic interests. I know that's a little wordy, so we'll break it down. Who is a public official? What's known as the 87200 filers, so city attorney, city manager, treasurer, planning commission, city council, finance director, members of appointed bodies who have decision-making authority all have to file. Also, any of city staff that are designated in the city's conflict of interest code, which we just took to council with a little update. Any of the consultants who serve in a staff like and decision-making capacity. So think building engineer, building official, and city engineer. And what is a government decision? So it's any time there's an action taken by the government that has a financial effect on a person other than the government itself making the decision. So you can't influence through voting, discussing, or lobbying. So what is a financial interest? Hopefully this part will start to make it a little bit more clear. Investments, income, business, real estate, and then gifts. So if there's a decision that comes before your body that involves your investments in business or real estate of more than $2,000, you may have to recuse yourself. So things that we're talking about here are property, rental property, your businesses, right? I've seen this happen. I think Planning Commission is the easiest example for these types of things, but a project is going in next to a business that someone owns. They own the land and they own a business with more than 2,000. So they have a couple different ways that they have a conflict of interest. The physical distance and then the value of their business itself. You couldn't participate typically in that decision. It also includes your immediate family, so domestic partners, spouses, and your dependent children. And that's true for all 5 of these. It applies to not just yourself, your immediate family, as defined by the FPPC, is your spouse, domestic partner, dependent children. Income is the next one. So any source of income of $500 or more in the last 12 months, as I said, includes you, your dependent children, your partner's income, loans and guarantors, and then promised income. So your income, very obvious. If the company that you work for comes before your body for a decision, regardless of what it is, and you make more than $500, you have to recuse yourself. There's no way around it. Promised income, someone that you're going to get a job from, they're going to come before your body for a decision. If that decision impacts your income, if it involves the person who pays you your income, you have to recuse yourself from that decision. Same is true for family. With loans, it only counts if it's like a person-to-person loan, not a commercial institution. So like if Bank of America comes to you, that's not the kind of loan that we're talking about. We're talking about the back of the napkin, I owe you for helping me buy my car or whatever the deal is, right? And there's some terms that go along with that that we can talk about later. Business position. So anytime that a decision involving the entity where you're any of these things. So for the nonprofit example, nonprofit comes before your body for a decision. You wouldn't be able to participate in that decision, regardless if you're a director, for example, regardless of whether or not you make money. Real estate, I think this is the one, it feels like it comes up the most, this one, in income. So if you're in a certain distance of a decision that you own or lease, there's varying degrees of disqualification. The further away that the decision gets from property that you own or lease, the less likely it is that you will have to recuse yourself. For example, anything over 1,000 feet, it's assumed that you don't have an issue unless we can prove that you do, which I know that sounds really lawyery and terrible. 500 feet, assume you can't participate. It's a very, very hard burden to overcome. Clear and convincing evidence. I've yet to see a decision working in ethics where we've been able to get somebody to participate in a decision in 500 feet of their residence. This middle 500 to 1,000 feet, it can affect the development potential or the value. This one gets a little trickier. Sometimes folks will get an appraisal to prove that there's no impact. I got a question last night of like, why would a commissioner ever do that? I've never seen it with a commissioner. It's typically very motivated council members who have eyes looking upward. We're participating in this affordable housing project. I had a council member wanting to vote on the Olympics, right? And their house was within, I think, 803 feet of where the Olympics was going to happen. And so they wanted to make sure that their record reflects that they're participating in these decisions. So just assume if this comes up, talk to Matt or I. We can help you with the analysis, or we can get you in contact with the FPBC. Keep in mind with the FPBC, they take a real long time to get back to you. And it usually isn't within the time period that we need to make decisions on things. Matt and I can help get at least an analysis of where we think that they're going to land, if you need this type of analysis. And then personal finance, this one's called the personal financial effect rule. So where it's foreseeable that the financial benefit or loss of $500 will happen for you or your family in any 12-month period. It feels very much like the income decision or the income conflict. It's a little bit different in the sense that it usually is, we're setting a salary, you know, your son is the only person in a position in the city, and you're approving a change in position or a change in salary, right? Or your partner, for example, changes in job classifications. It usually relates to hiring, promoting, demoting, suspension. It includes personal expenses, income, assets, liabilities of yourself and immediate family. Gifts. We talked about gifts a little bit earlier when we were talking about tickets. Any decision involving an individual or entity, you've received gifts aggregating to $500 or more in the previous 12 months is a conflict. This rule is very confusing to me because you're not allowed to receive gifts over $590 in the same calendar year from one person or entity. So it seems counterintuitive. There are some exceptions where you can, it's okay to receive gifts over $590, but it's a pretty set rule. Like there's like I said, a FBC handbook. It's quite long about all the exceptions. Yes, please come to the mic.
This is related to the property, actually. So two recent examples. One would be where the unhoused encampment location should be. That would be one. And the second was where stop signs should be located, like on Grand and Cuyama. That came up a while ago. In either one of those cases, would you have recommended, if asked, that a council person would say, I live, because there were several properties that were looked at, and would the council person been better to have said, if it was true, I live within X distance of that property that's being under consideration, or the stop sign? Is that clear what I'm saying?
The stop sign, there's an exception which we'll cover. It's the public generally exemption, where basically the impact to you is no different than the impact to everybody. Like a street, okay. Right? So the stop sign, I would say no. Where our friends are going to move, I would have to look at it when a bunch of people aren't staring at me, to be honest with you, to be fair, and think through what that is and what the impacts are, and what the distance, which category this fell within. So I don't want to answer it in this meeting. The stop sign one, I feel very confident saying it's likely the public generally exemption, which the impact to you is not distinguishable from the public. Okay. On this one. So also, we'll talk about it a little bit later for gifts, but you have to disclose anything that aggregates to $50 from one source. So with the tickets example, if you were given tickets, they were $40, you were given the set of tickets one time, that's not a reportable gift. The second time you get 2 tickets and they were $40, that's $80. Now you have to report everything that happened. So keep track of stuff like that, or don't accept gifts is the other way to go about it. We're not really talking about birthdays, holidays, similar occasions. You don't have to report when your partner gives you presents, right? I think we've seen with the Supreme Court that, like, we're assuming that your partner is actually a partner and not a relationship of convenience, and your friends are actually friends, and we're not saying that they're friends, but they come before you in important decisions so that we can get out of the ethics rules. That's not really what I'm talking about, right? And then as a general rule of thumb, so you don't have to remember all these rules, don't provide or receive any gift that would appear to improperly influence your decision. So plain English, don't take anything from anybody that wants something from you, and don't give anything to anybody that you want something from. I think that's a lot easier to remember. Also, it's less paperwork if you don't accept presents. This is that general public exemption. So, like I said, it applies when the effect on the official, their financial interest is not unique compared to the effect on the public. So with the stop sign, no financial effect of installing a stop sign, and everybody's affected the same, right? So usually for this comes up with assessments, taxes, fees, rates, and charges. And there's a percentage of the population that it has to affect to be valid. If this comes up, like I said, talk to Matt and I so that we can do the noodling through what this looks like. And if to note, if we have too many people on a body that have to recuse themselves, there is an exception to the exception called legally required participation. We get to draw lots for who the folks are to participate so that we have a quorum. How to recuse yourself due to a conflict. So when the agenda item is announced but before the discussion, state on the record that you have a conflict and what that conflict is. Publicly identify the financial interests. Recuse yourself from participation. Leave the room. If we're on Zoom, shut your mic off, shut your camera off, and then only return once the next agenda item is called. We don't want you mean mugging your colleagues to make a decision that benefits you. Okay, so a little pop quiz. A bakery needs to obtain a permit from the Planning Commission to operate within the city. Which of the planning commissioners can vote on the item? Commissioner A. Commissioner A's wife works full-time at the bakery. Commissioner B received a free breakfast bagel and coffee from the bakery. Commissioner C lives within 700 feet of the bakery. Commissioner D lent the owner of the bakery $3,000 9 months ago. Commissioner E owns a business next to the bakery. What do you think? B is okay, maybe C. Right? Like we would need more facts to run through the analysis of what the impacts were, but yeah, you guys got that very quick. You already exceeded the folks from last night. It's a competition. No, I'm just kidding. Ethics is not a competition. Ooh, James, can you turn it up just a scotch?
Told he's accused of lying to agents. LA City Councilman Mitch Englander is now in the custody of the FBI. We're told he's accused of lying to agents in a wide-ranging corruption probe of City Hall. KCO9's Dave Lopez is live in downtown LA with the details. Dave?
Well, it was 17 months ago that Mitch Englander stunned everyone and resigned his position as city council member, even though he had 2 years left, saying that he had a job in the private sector that was just, quote, too good to pass up. Today, he faced a judge. He faces the possibility of a long prison term. He's ordered free on bail, $50,000 once his wife posts it, and he has to surrender the 7 weapons that he has inside his home.
We'll go ahead and open the roll.
49-year-old Mitch Englander was a powerful member of the LA City Council. He's also a member of the LAPD Reserve Unit. And now he's looking at 50 years in federal prison if convicted for his alleged role in a scandal that has rocked City Hall and leaving many to wonder just how far will this go. In November of 2018, FBI agents raided the City Hall office of Councilmember Jose Rizar. Rizar has not been arrested as the investigation continues. Englander's name was never mentioned in that initial raid, but now he's under arrest, and Huizar's investigation by the FBI is ongoing.
I'm here to work. I'm here to do my job.
That was Huizar 2 weeks after the FBI searched his offices and his home, and that has been his standard answer ever since. Today, he had no comment about Englander's arrest. Englander, as well as Huizar, had been a member of the Plan and Land Use Management Committee, PLUM for short, the committee that oversees many of the major commercial and residential development projects in the city of Los Angeles. According to the indictment, a developer who had business in Los Angeles gave Englander a free trip to Las Vegas in June of 2017. The allegations, he also gave him $10,000 in cash, $1,000 in casino chips, paid for Englander's party for a $34,000 bar bill, $2,481 dinner tab, and $300 for an escort. And he's accused of telling the businessman, don't say any of this to the FBI, especially about the massage lady. Englander adding, don't say it, don't mention. No, don't mention it. The attorney for Englander did not go on camera, issued a written statement where she basically said that he has done a lot for the city and that he will overcome this obstacle, is the way she put it, with the help of his family. Also, John Lee was the chief of staff for Englander. He said today that he was in Las Vegas on the weekend in question, but he says that he did not get anything free. He paid for everything, was unaware of anything illegal that went on, and he also added that he is fully cooperating with this investigation with the FBI, and he's been interviewed at least 4 times. Again, Englander is free to go once his wife posts his $50,000 bond. Reporting live from outside the Roybal Center in downtown LA, Dave Lopez, Kick Online News.
All right, Dave, thank you.
Okay, so that was over the gift limit. All of it, right? Also, yeah, it's definitely an example of what not to do in the measure of like what would happen if this ended up in the news, right? And your actions, because it will end up in the news. Don't be this example for sure, but those were definitely over the gift limit. Income, presence, all of it, and illegal because it was also bribery. Okay, interesting contracts. I'm sorry, yeah, okay. As a public official, you can't have a financial interest in any contract that comes before your body. This law is very strict. It has a lot of moving parts to it. So if you or your family has a contract that might come before your body, just contact Matt and I, and we can work through what the facts are on an individual basis with you. A good example of this would be if you own a landscaping company and then it's coming before council to help Public Works and contract, right? That would be this type of a contract that you would benefit from. And you can't do that. And then what constitutes making a contract, voting to approve, designating specifications, preliminary discussions, negotiating, and then actually signing the contract. Yes.
This is related to serving on other boards. I saw, and I interpreted it as correct. Councilman Whitman, when something came up for Taft Garden, had recused himself just because there's family relations to Taft Garden, so I thought that was correct. And I'll use myself as an example. I was on the board of the Storytelling Festival, and I've left it just because they come in front of the city for things. So just in general, serving in some capacity besides volunteering for nonprofits, you wouldn't want to be on any other boards if you are a council person. Is that generally thought?
It depends if they come before you for a decision.
Yeah, like great
like grants, right? So for city council, I would say yes. I think in your example where you're on a nonprofit, but you're on the HPC, right, Mr. Egan? It's unlikely that the decision would come before you, right, with a nonprofit. So I think it depends on what your role is as an official. Since you're going for city council, I would say being sensitive to that is a smart move to avoid having a conflict of interest or even an opportunity of that, if we know that they're going to come before the city.
Well, 6 of...
I'm going to skip that example so we can get cooking. So, the Levine Act. We have some friends in the room today that are running for office, so this definitely applies to you. So, you cannot participate in any action concerning a license, permit, or other entitlement for use, also known as a proceeding. If you receive a political contribution from a party participant or their agents totaling more than $250 within the 12 months before the proceeding, while it's pending before the city, and for 12 months following the date of a final decision. If you receive a contribution of more than $250, you have an opportunity to still participate in the decision. You can either return the amount over $250, or you can disclose it on the record and recuse yourself, leave the room. And you have to say the nature of the conflict when you do that.
Can you give a hypothetical, concrete?
Hypothetical. So, planning is the easiest one that comes to mind, so I'm just going to use property. Those appeals go to council also, or a permit. So let's say an entity in the city. I was trying to put somebody on the spot.
Like a developer?
Yeah, like a developer wanted a permit. What?
I want a permit.
Okay, Larry wants a permit. Thanks, Larry, for sacrificing yourself for ethics. So Larry wants a permit. And Larry knows that he's going to go to Planning Commission. And then the decision isn't favorable to him at Planning Commission, so he appeals it to the city council. In the time between when the decision goes from planning to the city council, him and his wife contribute $500 to a council member. Right? That is over the gift limit because it can also aggregate, right? So that counts so it has to be within 12 months of the decision. So if it went from planning to council, I think we don't have office holder accounts here, so it would have to be during an election season, but contribute to someone's campaign within that time period between planning and council. That council member would need to recuse themselves or return the amount over $250. Yes, Larry.
What if it wasn't a campaign contribution? It was a payment. They took you out to dinner and spent $5,000 on dinner.
So that
took
would
you to
be
Vegas.
Oh, like our friend Mr. Englander.
Oh,
so
I want a permit.
So that would be a gift because a meal is a gift.
It's not a campaign contribution.
No, they're very different. And we'll talk a little bit more about gifts a little bit later on. But the gift still requires you to recuse yourself because it's well over the $590.
Clear and cut. Okay.
Right? And then even if you just let's say I'm the council member. You handed me a stack of cash, it was $5,000. Well, now that's income. So no matter how you slice it, if money is changing hands and a decision is going to happen, it's likely, we'll find a way to make it a financial interest or campaign contribution. Yes.
Okay. Let's say a nonprofit donates to your campaign, and they're actively working on your campaign, but there is financial exchange, and now there's something in the council that the nonprofit is fighting against or for. Would you say they've contributed to my campaign, so I'm going to recuse myself?
Yes.
That's what should happen.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
All right.
So, great segue to the next slide. So there are 3 categories of people that would cause you to have to recuse yourself. The party. So in this example, Larry getting the permit would be a party to the applicant or the person that's the subject of the proceeding. A participant. So for your example, the nonprofit actively supporting or opposing the decision in a Levine Act proceeding. With that one, there has to be a financial interest in the decision. So there would have to be a financial impact in your example for that to work.
That's key, what you just said.
Yeah. So, and the other thing too is we haven't figured out reading minds. So they have to come to public comment and say, if this contract gets approved, it's going to cause a loss of $1,000 to our organization, right? So there has to be some additional information that you're aware of, or if you're in a position where you knew or should have known that it would have caused the financial impact, that can cause a conflict too. So if with this, it can get complicated. So if you have an example, I think we can talk through it offline and the facts of it. Because the Levine Act, we're being very breezy here. It feels like a video game. It's like there's a lot of levels to it and there's a lot of layers to it. An agent is another person who can cause the conflict. So I see this more with lobbyists. We don't seem to have that issue as much here in Ojai, but usually the agent is lobbyist, or a director of a nonprofit could be an agent as well. And then what's a proceeding? It's any action to grant, deny, revoke, restrict, modify, license, permit, contract, or franchise. It includes like business permits, professional permits, land use licenses and permits, any other entitlement for use. So we're talking deeds, easements, those types of things. And then contracts other than competitively bid labor or personal employment. So competitively bid meaning that everybody has an opportunity to respond. It's not what's called a sole source, that city didn't give an opportunity for everybody to bid the contract. So like the Libby Bowl, right? We have an RFP out for the Libby Bowl. Everybody has an opportunity to write in and say, yes, I want to participate in the contract. If we just awarded it to one person without competition, that would be a sole source. There's a legal analysis that has to go with that. And it could disqualify you under the Levine Act.
In Orange County, former Anaheim Mayor Harry Sidhu has agreed to plead guilty to federal charges. That's according to court documents filed today.
The charges stem from his role in the canceled sale of Angel Stadium last year. KTLA 5's Orange County Bureau Chief Chip Yost joining us live from Santa Ana. He's got the latest on this story, Chip.
Yeah, hey there, Sandra and Pedro. Big news out of the federal courthouse here behind me in Santa Ana today, but not completely unexpected news that the mayor has agreed to plead guilty in a federal corruption probe. You may remember the mayor resigned last year after that same probe led to a plea deal with the former head of the Anaheim Chamber of Commerce. Well, now we've learned the mayor has reached a deal of his own. Former Anaheim Mayor Harry Sidhu has agreed to plead guilty to multiple charges related to an FBI corruption investigation centered on the sale of Angel Stadium. The city, which owns the stadium, had been in negotiations to sell the stadium to the Angels. But prosecutors say Sidhu, who was on the city's negotiating team, was secretly working for the other side, passing confidential information to people working for the Angels in order to help the team get a better deal. During an FBI corruption probe, Sidhu was allegedly recorded saying he expected to get a future $1 million campaign donation as a reward for his duplicity. As the FBI probe started closing in on him, he's accused in court papers filed in a federal courthouse in Santa Ana of trying to cover his tracks by deleting emails and documents. In a plea agreement, federal prosecutors say he's agreed to plead guilty to multiple charges, including obstruction of justice and making false statements to an FBI agent. The assistant director in charge of the LA field office of the FBI put out this statement saying Mr. Sidhu was elected by and pledged to work for the residents of Anaheim, but he violated that pledge and their trust on numerous occasions to look out for special interests. Mr. Sidhu deceived his colleagues and weakened the city's official strategy by divulging intellectual property, then lied to the government when his corruption was discovered. Now, Sidhu is expected to be in federal court later this month. As far as the sentencing, he could face the most serious charge he faces, carries a maximum sentence of up to 20 years in prison. For now, reporting live here in Santa Ana, I'm Chip Yost, KTLA 5 News.
All right, Chip, thank you.
California.
Yeah. It's not great, right? Don't betray the public's trust. Don't do illegal things for campaign contributions and for your own benefit, right? We're here to serve the city. We got a couple more slides and then we'll take a break. Incompatible offices. So you can't hold multiple offices. If there's any potential for a significant clash of duties or loyalties between the offices, and either the offices are supervisory, auditory removal, has auditory removal power over the other, does not apply to city employees. And you forfeit the first office on the second, when you accede to the second. Incompatible activities. So you can't engage in employment or an activity or enterprise for compensation, which is inconsistent, incompatible, in conflict with, or harmful with your duties as a city official. This one doesn't apply to elected officials. It applies to staff. The city has to have a policy which activities are compatible. So, like, don't work for a developer when you're processing their permit, right? That kind of thing. Not being on both sides of the transaction. Bribery, I hope this isn't news to anybody. It is a crime, and please don't do it. And it's not just money, it's anything of value. And you can lose your office. You can go to jail, fines, barred from office. Well, that's Weezar. That was the end of his story. We'll skip that part. Disclosure of confidential information for your pecuniary gain acquired in the course and duty of your service is a misdemeanor. So please don't do that either. Revolving door, 1 year after you leave service, you can't lobby or communicate with your previous agency. So council, city, whatever commission that you were on for compensation. Basically, not lobbying. There are exceptions to this for to influence a legislative, administrative action for permits, licenses, grants, property transactions, and contracts. There are some exceptions to this about representing yourself before the body. You can do that. And then you can't influence any city decision when the interest of your potential employer is at stake. So if you're going to get a job with Dunkin' Donuts after you leave office and they're coming before you for a permit for a drive-through, you need to recuse yourself. And you can't influence the decision of like, hey, can you just make sure that this permit goes through so I can be the donut king or queen? All right, let's take a little bit of break. Last night they wanted a shorter break. 5 minutes, 10 minutes? What would be good for you? I want to be respectful of your time. How much stretching time do you need? 10? Do 10? Okay. We'll see you in 10.
County.
Well, no, it didn't work. It's because they have a workforce housing and an affordable housing component.
No, I'm okay.
They're going to have some workers.
Oh, I don't know.
That's what I heard from Matt and Dan.
Okay.
Yeah.
Matt Levier.
Thank you.
This is what's going to happen all over Ojai. I mean, the citrus is all going. I mean, even Bob Davis is.
We can talk about it. Let's talk about that.
Yeah, I know. I was like very invested. But we got a little ways to go. I feel like the rest of the presentation, it feels downhill. We got through the really hard stuff. The rest of it, we're going to talk about the Brown Act and transparency and due process.
Oh, so you're going to tell us now how we can take advantage of personal advantages
Yes.
and perks.
Nailed it. Nailed it. This is how you make the best of your time in office. So we're going to cover loans, gifts, travel, honoraria, misusing public resources, mass mailings, gifts of public resources or funds, and then, I took this out, but soliciting political support from agency employees. So loans. As a public official, you can't receive loans from any city officer, employee, member, consultant, or anyone that contracts with the city. That should seem like a no-brainer. Personal loans over $500 from anyone else. They have to meet certain requirements. I had mentioned this earlier. So has to be in writing, clearly state the date, amounts and interest payable. If this comes up and you're going to take a loan from another person, the requirements are available on the FPP's website. And they, I said that their handbook is kind of long, but they do a pretty good job of translating all the laws into plain English and understandable for folks. Because sometimes it feels like Dr. Seuss when you're reading through these requirements. So gifts, we touched on this earlier. You have to disclose a gift of $50 or more. It aggregates from one source in the year. You do that on your Form 700. We're going to talk about the Form 700 in a little bit. It's a very important document. I know it doesn't feel like it. It feels like paperwork, but it is. And then we talked about this earlier too. Don't provide or receive anything from anyone that would appear to influence your decision making. A little bit more details on gifts. Is it a gift? So it's a payment made by any person of a thing of value when you don't provide anything, when you don't provide full consideration for it. So with our ticket example earlier, it's a gift if you receive a ticket and you don't pay for it. The minute that you pay for the ticket out of your own pocket, it's not a gift anymore. And I know that can be kind of awkward, but we were just joking about it during the break. It's only as awkward as you make it, right? If you operate ethically and you put that foot forward to people, they'll be hopefully understanding and responsive to it. It includes your spouses and dependent children. It's considered given as of the date that you receive it or that you're promised the gift. So examples of that: meals, food, gift cards, tickets or passes. It includes golf. Tangible items, stuff, wine bottle, clothing. I've been talking for like 3 days straight. Clothing, watches, alcohol, dinners, services, gifts from raffles also count. So I'm not going to read all of these for you, but they're in this. We'll have a PDF of this. All the different kinds of things, family, friends. If you have if you go to a ribbon cutting that has that you're the ribbon cutter, and for some reason that event requires tickets, that is not a gift. Home hospitality. I made the joke last night. If the home hospitality is Thomas Keller coming to cook a private meal, or Gordon Ramsay, should maybe consider whether that's a gift or not, instead of a lasagna, right? The value of it. More exceptions, and little notes for each of them. Gifts for attending the wedding, they're reportable, but they're half the value. Exceptions to gift restrictions for travel. There's a breakdown on this. I've included it in here for you. Travel is not really a hot topic for this agency, but you have the information if you need it. Also, don't accept, this is an old-timey rule, but free or discounted travel from transportation companies. It's a pretty big deal for doing this. We're thinking more along the lines of like airlines, cruises, those types of things. What do you do if you got a present that you don't want? Within 30 days, you can donate it to charity. By the way, you can't benefit from it. So if I don't recommend donating to a charity that your kid runs, you can't count it as a tax deduction because that's also a benefit. You donated to charity, right? And that's it. You can return the gift, reimburse the donor for market value, or for tickets, you don't use them or let anyone else use them. With this, I feel like it's only as awkward as you make it. Oh my gosh, thank you so much. It's so kind of you to think of me. I don't, because I'm a public official, I don't want to seem like I'm being influenced, but I really appreciate the thought. Can we donate this to charity? Would you mind giving it to someone else? That kind of thing. And I think if you create a culture in this community that's normalized, it might be awkward in the beginning, but hopefully over time, it's not. If it's not already a culture. Here's a summary of all of the rules. I included this to kind of synthesize it for you of how gifts work. Honoraria, which is a fancy word that I don't understand why we call it this, but it's really getting paid for giving speeches is the idea of an honoraria. It can also be writing articles, attending conferences, meetings, social events, getting payment. You can do all of those things. Please do. It's very important. But payment for it as a public official is generally prohibited. There are the idea with this one is that this is part of your job as a public official to do these things. So getting paid for it is really double dipping. This is another one where the rules are super complex and like I would bore you to death if we went through all of them today. So if this comes up for you, please reach out to Matt and I. We're happy to help you work through the facts of your specific situation. Because sometimes it is okay. Like I had a mayor who they would pay for his travel to attend the event, right? And for his stay at the event. And that was okay to make sure that he could get there and we weren't spending his personal dollars or private dollar or public dollars to get there, right? So as an example. But again, it's really contingent on the facts. Misuse of city resources. So you can't use city resources for personal enjoyment, non-public purposes, and campaign activities. So there's no loss. If there's no loss to the city, I'm sorry. This is for when there is a loss to the city that can be quantified, or there's a gain or advantage to you or another person because city resources were used. We're not talking about incidental and minimal uses. So like, the way I explain this is like, if you take a phone call from your kid or your parents at City Hall, that use is pretty nominal. But if you're trying to find a way, I had this in a city where like we did community cleanups and there was a very actual cost and the city provided dumpsters and shovels and staff time. So I think it was around $1,500 for these cleanup events and someone tried to turn it into a campaign event. That is a no-no. That's a misuse of public resources. We can't do that, right? You have to leave it as a campaign event and pay for it with your private dollars, or just it's a community cleanup that you're participating in, right? So not having staff pick up your laundry or kids, not using public works to remodel your house, which is a surprising thing that like people I can't tell you how many public officials have gotten in trouble with the feds for using public works And they're wonderful. Lindy's team is wonderful. They do an excellent job. I'm sure that they would be so great. And it's not a comment on them. You can't use their staff time and city resources for these types of things. You know, using a city vehicle to visit your family so you don't have to pay for gas. You can't do, and maintenance, right? You can't do those types of things. So city resources includes any property or asset owned by the city. We're talking land, property, money, equipment, telephones, vehicles, travel, city staff time. City staff time is a big one. I have an example for you here of, again, what not to do.
These devices. Tonight, new details on a public corruption case leading to multiple felony charges against a San Francisco public official and a former city employee. The director of the city's Community Challenge Grant Program, 53-year-old Lenita Henriquez, faces charges of bribery and misuse of public funds. 56-year-old Rudolph Jones, founder of RDJ Enterprises, is facing similar charges. He formerly served as deputy chief of staff to then Mayor Gavin Newsom. District Attorney Brooke Jenkins says Henriquez issued grants to Jones in her official capacity totaling more than $1.4 million.
Ms. Henriquez was responsible for deciding who received government contracts for pay. She received herself, as well as family members, checks from the individual who owned these companies that she then turned around and awarded these contracts to.
Jones also allegedly paid more than $150,000 to the director's family members. Henriquez was arraigned and pleaded not guilty this morning. Jones is scheduled to be in court tomorrow.
We could do 2 hours of me just playing videos of people that made the news doing stuff that you're not supposed to do. So you also can't use city resources for campaign activities. The city and you is under this rule. So, and when we say campaign activities, advocating for or against a ballot measure or candidate, including yourself. Go ahead.
This is actually a personal question. So I am meeting people weekly in Libby Park, and I'd publicize that to say, oh, if you want to talk about anything about the city, come meet me at the park. And I was thinking if I was elected that I would continue to do that, to say just open dialogue there. But would you suggest not meeting in a public park, in a city park like that?
Yeah, I have to double check.
Okay.
Carl's not here. I think the city adopted a policy, if I'm not sure, about campaigning and doing campaign things on city property. I will have to check. If as a candidate you didn't receive a copy of it, it wouldn't be fair to hold anybody to that. And it seems like y'all don't know what I'm talking about and that you read your emails. So I know it was something that we had talked about. I will look into that and get back to you separately. Yes.
Would that apply to what he was to campaigning in Libby Park now, or being mayor and sitting at Libby Park and talking?
So it would be for campaigning now.
Okay.
As mayor, you could meet in Libby Park, and it would be a community meeting, right? Once you're elected, it's more about leveraging city resources for your personal benefit or your campaign benefit, right? I'm trying to think of another example. I saw this has come up in my career the most with folks that were incumbents, so they're already in office and they had staff under them, and then like having the staff strong-arming them into doing candidate activities during city business hours while they were on the clock, or having them attend campaign events while they were on the clock, is the most frequent example that I've seen. The example for the city, so like our Measure O, the city, any materials that come out about Measure O it's Dragnet. It's just the facts. It's very vanilla. It's what it does, what it does not do. That's it. We can't be like, yay pickleball or no pickleball, right? We can't express an opinion. We can't encourage you to vote one way or the other. Our job as the government is to give you the information to make an informed decision as a voter. So like, that's why all the pickleball stuff isn't very jazzy. Yes, Mayor, would you like to come up? You're welcome.
Thank you, Taylor. And this is really fantastic. I really appreciate this presentation, and you're such a great addition to our staff.
Oh,
So
thank you. You're so sweet.
Thank you so much. A resident just texted me and asked if we could backtrack for just a second. She just wanted some confirmations because she tuned in a little late.
Oh, sure.
Nonprofits cannot make contributions to campaigns. Is that?
No.
Okay. She would like, and I know I'm sorry to backtrack.
No,
If-
it's okay.
If you could just go over that
so
one more
we're
time.
talking
that'd
about
be
the
great.
Levine Act. So
Yes.
let's see how quickly we can jam back. Also, I would just like to acknowledge the TI team. We have this very cool remote now, which is a new addition to the chambers, and it's pretty great. It's here. So the rule isn't that you can't receive a contribution
from a nonprofit.
From a nonprofit. So there's a couple layers to this. Number one, if the nonprofit knows that it's going to come before the city for a decision within the next 12 months, and it's campaign season, being thoughtful about not contributing more than $250 to a candidate, because it puts them in a position where they may have to recuse themselves or return the money. That's what the issue is. It's not that you can't do the contribution. It's that the nonprofit itself can't contribute.
Great.
Right, above $250. I don't even want to say that. So you can contribute over $250, understanding that if a decision comes to council or one of the commissions, that whoever received the contribution may have to recuse themselves. And even now, I just said commissions. I think Mr. Quillisi is the only person that would apply to currently, right? Because he's on planning commission, so this Levine Act information would apply to him.
Perfect. All right. Thank you for the clarification.
Yeah, no
Appreciate
problem.
it.
And
Yep.
then I would just like to say, if you Google FPPC and Levine Act, they have done a very nice job of putting all these requirements in plain English for the public. So I would encourage the nonprofit to go check that out so they're informed. Because there's a lot more nuances to it than we can talk about today. I have a whole presentation about the Levine Act. We could talk about it for an hour. But the gist is just being sensitive. If you have a decision coming before council, that's where the issue is. Or in this moment, planning commission.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
Yeah, of course. No problem. Intermission.
Related to what the mayor just asked?
Yes.
You had said if there was something like a gift or a party or something like that, and you said, well, if you have some guest chef, then that could be quantified as a monetary value. But if the nonprofit is providing things that is not directly, here's a cash donation, but here's all this activity that they spent money on to host something.
It's called in-kind
Yeah,
services.
you're right. And that's
a
okay?
contribution.
Right. Okay.
Right. That's a contribution. I'll have to double check. I don't recall. I don't think the Levine Act considers in-kind contributions, but I will have to double check on that one. I haven't had that issue come up. But I think you have to report in-kind contributions as a contribution. So I would say erring on the side of caution. Same. Okay. It sounds like we need a Levine Act presentation is what it sounds like to me. So mass mailings, we have this isn't a big hot issue in Ojai, but we have to cover it for legal reasons. So mass mailing, so you can't send to more than 200 substantially similar items that feature an elected officer using city funds unless there's an exception. This rule applies all the time. It has to be a tangible thing that a postal person delivers or another human being can hand to you. So this happens, I feel like it happens more in bigger agencies where we have council members that have access to staff and do mailing and right where they're having these big community events. This doesn't come up as much in Ojai. So exceptions to this are letterhead, roster on stationery, meeting announcements, event announcement, business card, as long as they follow these rules. So it can't contain the elected officer's photo signature or more than one mention of the officer. So that picture of me on this postcard would be an illegal mass mailing, and can't be sent by a candidate on or behalf of a candidate within 60 days of election. If you don't have access to public resources and sending mailings with your picture on it, don't worry about this one. Gifts of public resources and funds. An appropriation benefiting a private party is unconstitutional in California if either the agency receives no adequate consideration in return and the expenditure does not serve a public purpose. So what this means is the city can't just donate money to people or give money to people, is usually how this works. It can also come up with stuff. Like, for example, I came from a city where the building needed to be retrofitted. We had to move to a new building. We had a ton of office furniture and tchotchkes and stuff in this building. The things that still had value went onto a auction website for other agencies to be able to bid. Everything else had to go into the trash, even though it was perfectly good, because we can't give things away for free. We have to have somebody either come and buy them, or it goes in the trash, which sounds so silly from an environmental purpose, but it's against the law for an agency to do something different. So this goes for charitable contributions. It goes if there's a death and you want to do a nice thing. We can't use city dollars to send a bouquet of flowers for the arrangement, even though that sounds very cold-hearted. We can't have a benefit to a private individual using public dollars. So it's something to think about, especially with nonprofits. This seems to come up a lot, like with Help Ojai. We can't just give Help Ojai money because they're so great, right? We have to get services in exchange for that money, because we're good stewards of the people's money. We have to get something in it back for our dollars. So an example of this, paying people for work that they hadn't performed. Oh, I'm sorry. We also can't give bonuses just for doing a job that you've already done, right? And so this next example is an example of that. There was an accidental overpayment, and staff had already performed the work, and they were required to give the money back, which was very, very controversial. But you have to go above and beyond to be eligible for a bonus if a government agency even has a bonus structure in the first place. And usually the bonus structures are very nominal because of this gift of public funds and resources issue.
Soledad now, and more than 100 school staff there with the school district being asked to repay a year's worth of overpaid wages. A year's worth. Action News 8 reporter Christian Valderas is live in Soledad with details. Christian?
Yeah, Aaron, multiple employees have told me that the district officials are meeting with them individually to outline their options and get them to sign a repayment plan. They're being told if they don't sign that agreement,
oh no! They fear retaliation. We're gonna. Oh no, this video is not very good. Okay, I thought it was yesterday. But basically that was the gist. The employees were pissed. They were so pissed because somebody somewhere didn't do their job, right? And it resulted in employees in a community where those friends are lower socioeconomic. They don't have extra dollars, right, to pay it back. It's hard for them to pay it back. The money had already been spent. So being diligent, doing the right thing, making sure we have policies and procedures in place to prevent those kinds of things from happening is very important. Serious consequences for improperly using or unlawfully using public resources. You can not only lose office, but be disqualified for the rest of your life. You can go to prison for 2 to 4 years. $1,000 a day plus 3 times the value of whatever the resource was that you took. And that doesn't include all the lawyers' fees and prosecution and time that comes with that. And it's possible that there's prosecution for tax evasion. Isn't Matt so funny in jail? These crack me up when I get like Matt. Like, sorry, Matt. All right, transparency. This is, I know that these laws can be really frustrating. They're personally my favorite because I think that being a transparent government is the way that we gain the public's trust. If you're doing nefarious things in secret, it makes them feel like you're doing nefarious things in secret. Even if you're not, if you're just doing a lot of things in secret, there are options for, and opportunity is a bad word. There are times where it's appropriate for things to happen behind closed doors so that council can have a free discussion to make a decision that's in the best interest in the public. And they usually, the decision has to be reported out. We'll talk about it in the Brown Act. But usually in the long run, the decisions come out, right? So through a public item, but council needs the space to have the discussion with receiving confidential information, right? So the point of these laws is you trust what you can see, right? I don't know if you've ever heard the phrase democracy dies in darkness, right? The best antiseptic to a corrupt government is sunshine. Putting things out in the light, being transparent, very important. It's intended to promote participatory democracy. And there's 2 types. It's transparency of people and transparency of government processes in the public. So people would be like the Brown Act. Government to the processes to the public would be more like the Public Records Act. So I mentioned this earlier, the Form 700. I know it can feel like paperwork and like it just is like bureaucracy. It is a very important document. So certain public officials have to disclose their financial interests. I think everybody taking this course right now has to do that. It includes city positions involved in making decisions, and you file when you take office annually and when you leave office. And why this is important. So it provides transparency and accountability to you, to the public about your financial interests. It ensures that you're making decisions in the best interest of the public and not your own personal finances. That's not why we're here. And then it helps you identify and avoid potential conflicts of interest, because when you write them all out on paper once a year, you should know going into that year what your conflicts are. It is not comprehensive. There are some conflicts of interest, like at common law, or where there's an appearance of wrongdoing where maybe you should recuse yourself, but the financial ones get outlined in this document. My tips for you is don't be that public official. Staff works real hard and we're quite busy doing other stuff. So file on time when you get the email for the Form 700. Keep a running total through the year of the gifts you receive on what date and what source where you're ready. Be aware that if you have a partner, a spouse or domestic partner, you likely have to report their community property share of 50%. And this form gets easier unless you're like an investment banker where you're shifting your assets all of the time. I personally have had to file this form, and I make minor updates and get to refile the same forms every year. So I guess I'm not financially that interesting, but right, it is kind of, don't make it bigger than it is, right? Just get it done and comply with it. Fair processes. So this area of the law is to promote the value of fairness. It's the notion that everyone has the right to be treated fairly by the government, regardless of who they are or who they know, right? So the public's perception that the decisions are made fairly is key to the element of the public's confidence and trust in government and the individual public offices. So as a public official, you're required to exercise your powers free from personal bias and be fair and impartial when your body is sitting in a quasi-judicial capacity. So quasi judicial is a very fancy word to mean that you're kind of sitting similar to a judge. It usually happens with permits, appeals, disciplinary actions, licenses. It can happen with annexation protests. Usually they take the form of a hearing, is the way to know you're sitting in a quasi-judicial capacity. It doesn't apply necessarily to a quasi-legislative, which is like when we're making policy. We had Nature Night on Tuesday, so those policies, right, where we considered a lot of things about the environment and the city's policies and ordinances on those things. You're not necessarily required to have a fair and unbiased decision maker in those instances. It is helpful to build the public's trust when you do that, right? So these come up really for City Council, Planning Commission, the Building Appeals Board, and HPC. Each of them has their own individual powers about permits and licenses and things like that, or appeals. And when we say free from personal bias, we're really talking about you're fair and impartial and you don't have any conflicts of interest and you haven't made up your mind before you get there. So due process and fair hearings requires notice of the intended action, opportunity to prepare, opportunity to be heard, fair and impartial hearing, and decision makers that are fair and impartial. Types of decisions are quasi-legislative and judicial, which we just covered. So what happens when there's not a fair hearing? These consequences are really embarrassing if you're the person who was not fair and impartial, because it usually results in a court overturning the decision, it being sent down to the city council. You're probably in the paper for this, not being impartial. And usually the decision has to be reconsidered because it wasn't fair in the first place. Happens a lot with developments is where I see this come up the most. It can come up with other things too, like enforcement hearings. It can affect the public's trust in government also. That it's like where there's smoke, there's fire, right? So if you are biased and partial, or you acted unfairly in one instance, the public will assume that you're going to do that in other instances as well. So one of the ways that this comes up is ex parte contacts. It's not a party that you should go to. It's a communication that occurs between you as a decision maker and a third party outside an official proceeding and off the record. This is a really big way that you can ensure that you're giving a fair hearing is by not having ex parte contacts. Usually if an ex parte contact does occur, we recommend that you recuse yourself, at the very least that you announce it on the record of the hearing so that the parties can respond to it. If you have questions about stuff like this, you can definitely contact our office and we can talk, or contact staff to contact our office. We can talk through it. So this comes up between you, parties, applicants, members of the public. It can come up with contractors, vendors, between staff, council members, the mayor, between commissioners. While an application is pending, while we're trying to pick a contractor, before a project goes for one of the decision-making bodies, before a license contract project goes before a body, and before an appeal. So what do? We mentioned this. Either disclose it on the record to give everybody an opportunity to comment, and depending on what the degree is, recuse yourself. I know I work with Planning Commission. They have a culture. It's not a big deal. It doesn't have to be a big deal. At the beginning of all the projects, everybody goes around. I went and walked the site. I bumped into the applicant. We talked about how it's been cooler in Ojai this week and the heat wave is over. And right, it doesn't and being honest and transparent about it, don't lie. Also, it's the next slide. How to provide a fair hearing. So I mentioned this a couple times because it's very important and I hope it sinks in. Avoid having ex parte contacts to the extent possible. Disclose or recuse if they do happen. Don't express your opinions about something before it comes before your body. That is a giant red flag that you've already made up your mind before you've already heard all the evidence and you haven't given the parties an opportunity to tell you everything. You don't have all the information. You shouldn't be making up your mind. I know there have been court cases where council members or commissioners have outlined how they were going to say no to a project and why, and they had a writing of it and there were records. Like, don't be that person. Be fair, right? Receive and consider all the evidence about a matter only when it's presented to you at a public meeting. Don't make a decision until you've heard and received all the evidence at the public meeting. And then I haven't seen this here, but we're going to include it. Don't contact staff to influence what happens on an application, project, or license. I've seen public officials who, you're going to approve that ministerial permit, right? Right? Or you're going to hurry this up and we're going to move this along and make sure that it gets approved, right? No. Also, staff doesn't work for you. We covered that earlier on in the presentation. So don't boss them around. Competitive bidding. This is another important requirement in government. It's to allow everybody who's interested an opportunity to do business with the city. We have an obligation to ensure that the public receives the best deal for the money, right? Tax dollars come into the city. We shouldn't be spending it on the most expensive contractor. Sometimes it makes sense to pick a contractor that is a little bit more expensive because they have the expertise that we need, or they have institutional knowledge of the city. And there's other factors that we can consider, but generally you have to get the best deal for the dollar. This keeps contracts from being steered because of personal and political relationships, corruption, and all of those people that we got to watch in the videos. Nepotism. It's favoritism based off your kinship. So we know under the Political Reform Act that you have to disqualify yourself for any decisions that increase, decrease your family's income, and for any of the other types of conflicts of interest. There's no state law on point to this concerning nepotism for hiring and appointing. The city can draft a policy. We are talking about this, so it might come to you at a later time. Brown Act. I know the Brown Act can be kind of frustrating because it seems like it hinders business, but it's incredibly important. So this law came into effect because, shocker, people were having meetings in secret and doing nefarious things behind closed doors. I believe in the 70s. So it's important to have things out, open, and public so that the public can participate. Actions and deliberations have to be taken openly. Everyone has the right to attend and participate in the meeting. Only matters on the agenda can be discussed. Yes.
So, a question on that last line, only matters that the agenda can be discussed. So, in working with staff, oftentimes we're told that because of different things going on, we have to get the information to staff 2 weeks in advance for it to get included in the package. Often things then take place within those 2 weeks, but we're not allowed to bring them to the meeting, discuss them in the meeting, even bringing copies of that items and making that available to the full commission, as well as to making it available to the public set outside. I mean, our liaison takes care of us, but of course we look to that person to be also our keep us in line type thing. But that is frustrating for, less frustrating for me because I work with our liaison because I'm the chair. Very frustrating for people that aren't in that communication path. And so is there...
I can understand where you're coming from. I think
thank you.
The flip side of that is pulling together an agenda and all the materials takes time.
Absolutely.
Right? And so there has to be space left for that. I think it would depend on the facts of the scenario of what happened, but the 2 weeks is to ensure that staff has adequate time to prepare it for the commission.
True.
Same is true for council. Like, very seldomly do things come up very quickly. It puts staff in a constant state of stress to have to respond immediately to those types of things. If it depends also on how the agenda item is written. Right? So if the agenda item is written in a specific way where we can't talk about something, you could lay the item over and we could tweak the language to allow for whatever the discussion is with the new information that you have. I think that that's always the best thing to do so that everybody can prepare for it. The important thing is that the public has notice and staff has time to prepare for what goes on the agenda. Very seldomly, I know things can feel urgent sometimes. Very seldomly are they actually urgent. In my experience, a lot of things are political emergencies and not actual emergencies. No offense. Not actual emergencies, and being sensitive to that. Like, I know that some projects and things are important to the community, but there are multiple stakeholders in that instance, right? There's the commission itself, there's staff, and the public. And we have to make sure that those interests are being balanced. So 2 weeks, I have to tell you, is I've come from agencies where it's a month. So, like, not to diminish how frustrating that you feel, but in some other agencies, they put a significant timeline on it because of the amount of things that has to happen. Here, we're a little able to be more nimble. And I think for your commission in particular, the issues are complicated and important, and there's a lot of laws that apply to those things. So we want to make sure that we're absolutely prepared when a decision comes before you. Right? So, I'm not sure I really answered your question, but I hope I gave you more information.
You did. I mean, it's just, again, it's a frustration to, we have an excellent staff person.
Sure, you do.
We work really well together, but I'm in almost constant communication with her, but it's not something that I can relay. So, sometimes when she's sharing with the guidance, it comes over as limiting, but, because I think they don't understand everything that takes place in the background.
So I think
so this is kind of an information for all of our commission and other commissions that might have the same
So
queries.
I think that you have an opportunity as the chair, right? As the chair of the commission, and being a leader of the team, right? You have an opportunity to set the tone at the beginning of the item of, I'd just like to acknowledge to my colleagues that I'm aware that some issues have come up in the time period preceding this item. There's a requirement with the city so that we can allow staff sufficient time to get the agenda item ready, that these items have to be prepared 2 weeks in advance. I just want to acknowledge we can't talk about those things today, but we are looking into adding that at a future meeting. And I just want to acknowledge it. And then by you setting the tone as the chair, we talked about this earlier, trickles from the top. It prevents your staff member from getting beat up by the rest of the commissioners because they think that they're not doing their job, which isn't true. There's other factors at play, right? And then it sets the tone of like, I'm acknowledging the thing that happened. You don't have to not talk about it. You can't discuss it. So as long as it doesn't turn into a discussion, you can acknowledge what happened. Right? So, yeah, and I think if you change your perception that you're a leader, right, and you set the tone how we're going to treat staff and acknowledging the space, it's okay for you to do that. I think it takes some of the steam and frustration out of it, right? So, yeah, I know bureaucracy can be frustrating. But a lot of these rules are in place too, so we can make sure that the public has access and they know that they can participate. Because I've seen that, right, where they try to throw, happens more with council members. They try to throw things on the agenda at the last minute so that there's no time to prepare, there's no thoughtful consideration, and it's definitely not, I haven't seen that in this agency, just in my career. And it's intentional. It's intentional to do it at the last minute to try to get something by and be sneaky, and so that it can't be blown up by colleagues, right? Less here, but yeah. I think the other thing that I would just want to acknowledge is commissioner comments. I know we have a culture of doing that, or council comments here. Oh man, it gives me indigestion. I literally hate that agenda item, and I want to acknowledge that everybody cares about the community so much, and that has been relentlessly apparent to me. The problem is in commissioner comments when we get into discussions about, or even staff reports, discussions on things that aren't on the agenda, and trying to vote on things other than we all agree that this needs to come back at the next meeting. That is literally the only vote that should happen in commissioner comments. It should be a comment, not a discussion, right? And so encouraging the chairs, no pressure, to snipe when we start getting into a space of discussion on things that aren't on the agenda, and just acknowledging, okay, let's bring that at a future meeting, because the public doesn't know that they should be there to participate for that discussion. And that is a huge problem. And then I think the other thing, y'all know each other. You know, like Larry, no pressure, Larry, but like, right, that you all know each other, you have relationships with each other. This is a very tight-knit community. We can get in the habit of going back and forth during public comment. I think responding to questions is okay. We have to be careful of where that discussion goes, and that we're not talking about things on the agenda. Also treating the public who's commenting with respect when they're doing it, and that we're not knocking the legs out from under folks when they come up to the mic to express their opinion, even if we don't agree with it, right? The caring very loudly. Were you going to say something? You look like you were going to get up.
Yeah, I just wanted to make one clarification. So I talk with our liaison. Also, our liaison has made it clear to the commissioners that she's always available for them to talk directly with her.
Yeah.
So I just want to get that out to the
Oh,
public.
yeah,
also.
no. There was no judgment. I think we were penciling through your question. You know what I mean? And I don't want you to feel, any of you, to feel judgment or shame about.
Oh, I don't. But I don't want anyone raising questions because I left out some
facts. Sure. Yes.
The last item, only matters on the agenda can be discussed. I think we've all seen examples where the conversation ravels out to the tether of the conversation is barely attached to the item. So is there any, I can see how the argument could be made to talk about almost anything. So is there any objective criteria? Is it just a leadership question again? Mm-hmm. That's what it is.
Yeah, and I think as a chair, you have a responsibility to herd the cats. Right? And you can be respectful, and hopefully you have a culture in your body, whatever it is, to, hey folks, let's keep it focused. If we need to, we can lay this item over if this is the discussion that we want to have. You have tools. And I think we're not talking about it today, but Rosenberg's Rules of Order is a tool to manage that, right? We're making motions to lay things over and come back at another time. And being a leader in that space to focus the discussion and hold each other accountable, right? And not doing it in a way where it's not a personal vendetta. It's like that we're all operating from a space that we have an obligation to the public to not talk about things that aren't on the agenda. And if we operate in that shared understanding, and that kindness, right, of we want to make sure that the community is here and can hear what we have to say if they want to be, it makes it hopefully less contentious. Yes, Larry?
What if the consequences of the item being discussed have nothing to do with the item? but they're predictable consequences that would not be discussed because it's not obvious.
I think it depends. I would need more facts to answer your question. I think there is potentially a space.
You can get to it.
Yeah, it's a thin red line, right?
But this, like, for example, I don't have an example right now, but, discuss this, but this is what could happen or is able to be happened if this happens, but there's no real hypothetical
falls into an example, it seems to me, of you say, here's this thing that's being proposed, and you could imagine from past behavior, past activities in the city, there's going to be constituencies that are going to go against it in the past.
Mm-hmm.
So you have a hypothetical lawsuit conversation now.
Oh, sure.
Or something like that.
Yeah, so I think that you could do that because it's a consequence of this decision, but I would be careful how far down that road that we go. Right? Like if it's valid to the decision that you're making, you could have that discussion. I think it's so fact specific. Commissioner comments is like the best example that I can give you, where the agenda item is for everybody to acknowledge the cool things that are happening and that they're doing. Or like, I went to a conference and I did this thing, and it turns into, well, we should approve this decision. Whoa, Nelly, that is not what this agenda item is, right? So I think that's the easiest example for me. The public should have notice, especially when we're dealing with like money and permits and property. Those are things that like we should absolutely be transparent about on the agenda. Or like for HPC or planning. Well, that one project, and then you start getting into the weeds about let's beat up on the arcade. We're painting the arcade, right? It's not on the agenda. We didn't talk about it earlier, and neither of those things allow you to talk about it in commissioner comments. So if you wanted to suggest that the arcade should be painted, and I'm a commissioner, I would say, I'd like to bring an item forward to recommend to staff that the arcade is painted. That doesn't feel appropriate. We're just using this as an example, right? And someone's like, well, I think that color of the arcade's ugly. And then it's like, I don't think it should be painted. It's fine. Well, I think it should be knocked down. Like, I don't know why you would want that, but you get the point. Like, I'm being a little silly right now. But where we get into a full discussion in commissioner comments, and what should happen is, I think we should talk about whether we should paint the arcade in the next meeting. I second the motion. Everybody agrees by consensus. It can go on the next meeting. And then the public can participate, staff can prepare, and we can have a full-blown hearty discussion about whether we think that that's a good idea or a bad idea, right? And I know that that's not normally how painting the arcade works. I'm using that as an example, right, of like how I can see that situation going off the rails. So just being very careful. It happens in all of our bodies. And as the leader or the chair of the commission or council, like you can rein that in and hold people accountable and have a culture of that. Okay, so we're gonna run a little bit over, but that's okay. You've all had very good questions. I'll try to cook through these parts. So the whole point of the Brown Act is to keep things in the light, avoid appearances of wrongdoing. It also helps protect due process rights of the parties. Who is subject to the Brown Act? Legislative bodies. All of the bodies on this list are legislative bodies, so subcommittees committed by a formal action. Like the budget committee, that's not its full name. It's going to come to council next on the 8th, right? That would be a subcommittee created by council. Or actually, no, that's not true. It's a body created by council. All of the bodies on commissions are created by council. That's the category it falls into. There is an instance for receiving funds. I don't think we have that here in Ojai. It's not temporary ad hocs of less than a quorum of the body. So formed for a temporary purpose, very focused you're coming back to make a recommendation to everybody because it's real hard to be nimble in a public meeting, and you're going to report back and do the homework for the rest of the commissioners or council, so everybody can talk about it with the information that you've figured out. So a meeting under the Brown Act, majority of members at the same time and place to discuss or deliberate any item that's within the scope of the legal duties assigned to your body. So a quorum is needed to hold the meeting. Quorum is measured by more than 1/2 of a body. So for city council, it's 5. Half is technically 2.5, so it turns into a 3. Right? So I'll talk about it here. So serial communications are prohibited. This is when each communication in the series is less than a majority of members, but when you add all of the communications up about a matter, it ends up forming a majority. With commissions that are 5 is real short. So if a majority is 3, you can talk to one other person about the item without violating the Brown Act. And I would really encourage you, we talked about this last night, creating a culture of how many people have you talked to about this already? Oh, I talked to so-and-so and so-and-so. Okay. I'm going to Brown Act boundary you. We're not going to talk about this because that would be inappropriate. There. Can you come to the mic?
What if you talk about 2 different things about the same thing?
Does it umbrella for
you know what I mean?
for
It's like-
umbrella for the matter?
Okay.
So using
For example, if I want to talk about the swimming pool at OUSD, and somebody wants to talk about, I want to talk to you about the water, but I want to talk to him about the concrete.
No, it's the pool.
Got it.
Yeah, assume it's and then I've seen agencies, I think this is a good practice, that like whoever that one person is you talk to about the pool, that's your person now. Right? We're not talking, right? For as long as you're in office, that's your person to talk to about the pool. So there are a few ways that this comes up. I have the examples here. So hub and spoke. So one person, if we were all a body, I'm one person, I go to each of you and I'm like, you're going to vote yes on the swimming pool, right? Swimming pool? Mm-hmm. And by the time I work my way around to all of you, I'm the hub, you're all the spokes, and I've gotten all of you to agree to pass my item unanimously on the pool. That is illegal. Don't do that. Daisy chain. So this is more like a game of telephone where member blue contacts member green, green contacts orange, orange contacts pink, and then we have the whole rainbow, and y'all have communicated and we've all gotten to yes. Also not allowed. By representative, this can happen a few different ways. Here in the example, member green's partner conveniently volunteers at a nonprofit. We're all other members of the body, and they're like, oh, what do you think about that swimming pool that my husband came up with? Isn't that such a great idea? You're going to vote yes on that. I mean, the kids, it's so hot here in the summer, right? Those types of things. So that's not, okay. You can't do it through one of your representatives. Emails, text, social media communications involving a majority of members. They passed some laws recently about this. Liking, sharing, retweeting. I'm not very good at social media, so forgive me. Hearting, commenting. All of those things can be considered a concurrence. So don't do it. And I also would encourage you to be very thoughtful about the things that you share on social media that are coming before your body, because there's other issues that come along with this of like that you've already made up your mind. So like the arcade painting. I hate the arcade painting, right? Like I don't want that to happen. I think it should stay the way that it is forever. And you've expressed an opinion and all the other commissioners thumbs up your comment. We've now reached a concurrence, right? So yes, be very careful.
Well, what would a council person do if there appeared to be some kind of evidence that the person had made up their mind? For example, they read something that they brought that they already printed out, or there was a social media post and here it is and it got divulged in the meeting. What would a council person do in that case?
I think, well, so here, using the information, it depends on what the issue is. If it's something quasi-judicial, I literally hate that word, quasi-judicial, I would be transparent about it. Of like, hey, I just want to acknowledge I saw that this post and this thing happened and I did read it, and treat it like an ex parte contact. This is coming to a concurrence about it. If you think that happened, that you accidentally came to a concurrence on social media, you should call Matt and I, and we will talk about how to mitigate the issue and cure the Brown Act violation, because the rules are a little bit different. But in most cases, transparency is a way to resolve a problem. I know I keep saying all the things you can't do. Here are the things you can do. You can talk to individual people. You can talk to other members, but keeping in mind whatever the quorum is of your body. You can talk to constituents, advocates, residents, staff, colleagues. You can go to the same conference if it's open to the public. You can go to a local public meeting, like this one. You can go to an open meeting of another body or a social or ceremonial event. I highly recommend you don't sit in the corner whispering secrets in other commissioners' ears. Council members, even if you're talking about the present you're going to get for your partner or your kids, and a big nice surprise for Ben because he's doing such a great job. It looks like you're telling secrets about commission business to the public, and I just avoid it. Agenda posting requirements. So regular meetings are 72 hours, special meetings are 24 hours. This is for the public. It's to let them know that they should participate or not in the meeting. You can, the description should be clear enough that the public knows they should participate. So approval of contract 72397, that's not enough. Contract to approve painting of the arcade and who the contractor is and how many dollars that we're going to spend on it, that's what's appropriate. Has to be within the city and accessible under the ADA. There are a whole lot of rules we're not going to cover today about participating virtually. If you need to participate virtually, please give staff in my office and Ben, or commissions, give staff notice. For council, give Ben notice, and then we'll work through whether we can make that happen or not, because there's very specific rules. There is an updated commission handbook that's going out, and I included a handy dandy chart for you to make it easier, because the laws, there's like 3 different sets of laws on virtual participation, which is very fun. Rights of the public, they can comment on any matter within the agenda. They can record the meeting or take photographs as long as they're not being disruptive. Review agendas and other writings, attend without registering or giving you their name, and to witness votes, except for closed session. But even for closed session, there's a report out element. No secret ballots. Closed session, there's very limited reasons that we can talk about things behind closed doors. Most of them are personnel, safety, lawsuits are the big ones. Like I said, you have to, the action that gets taken has to be reported out, and the agenda has to be clear about the categories. Don't go to Brown Act jail. You can enforce by future violations. Costs and attorney's fees can be awarded to the successful party, and it is a misdemeanor if you intentionally intended to deprive the public of information. Public records, we are rounding thirds, sliding into home. It's important for you to just know about this. There's 2 different rights of access for the public to inspect, unless there's an exception, during city business hours. In theory, this is true. In practical terms, we usually have to redact records. We can make arrangements for you to come hang out with Weston and inspect records, but we have to review them first. It's mostly to protect the right to privacy for other residents in the city or applicants, and then the right to receive copies promptly. So when we say writing, We're talking tangible things that have information on it, anywhere from digital and paper records to electronic documents and photos. Here are some examples of what that looks like. It's normal business stuff. And with that, emails, social media posts, text messages about city business on city and or your personal accounts and devices are public records. You're a public official. You're responsible for providing those records in response when Weston emails you. Please don't make him chase you down. He's a very nice person and he's very busy doing clerk stuff.
Are you saying all of the emails on your personal or public that you're talking about city business, you would send to Weston?
Yes.
Upon request, once a week, once a month?
No, so it would be in response when somebody says, I want all emails, in your example, from the mayor, right, on X issue, right? And you would be required to collect them and give them to Weston. You're responsible for it. So if there's a lawsuit somewhere down the line that the records weren't given out and you're subpoenaed, that's on you. That's on you to provide them or not, right? That question came up yesterday about like texting during the meeting. If you're texting about city business during the meeting, first of all, texting during the meeting makes it look like you're doing bad guy stuff, or it can give a public perception to that. But if you're talking about city business, those are public records. So being careful about that. With social media too, there's some case law that came out of the Supreme Court recently. You can't block anyone from accessing your page or content if you talk about city business. You should follow the city social media policy if you want to delete a post. It's based on the First Amendment exceptions of why you can delete a post, like someone is threatening to hurt me, right? So, and you can archive the content you've posted. You should, instead of deleting, because it's a public record. Or keep them separated, right? Have a different account for all of your city business stuff. I know council members get city emails, so it makes it a little bit easier. Commissioners don't. And that's the end of it. We made it. Are there any other questions before we wrap this up? Yes. Mr. Eakins.
Just a quick question. Is this presentation available
after? Yes, we're going to have a copy of the presentation and the video is going to be available. I still have to travel home, so I'm probably going to email you certificates by Monday and sort through that. And then if you,
when you're done,
all of this is on the city's landing page where you normally would access agendas. Yes, Larry.
Question.
Yeah.
I understand if somebody is mayor, okay, they're essentially the whole city. So whatever they talk about within about the city is city business. If a commissioner of the Historical Association wants to talk about art, planning, right? Some comments, he's commenting on planning. Is that considered city business for the art commissioner?
So I think it depends on the context, right? So
it has to be in context.
Yeah, I think it does.
You're prohibited. You can't talk about anything.
So you can always talk about anything because the First Amendment, you still have that right? But I think it's the way that you're talking about it. So, like, for example, you always, as a commissioner or council member, have the ability to be critical of the government.
Okay.
The example of the case, or one of the cases that went to the Supreme Court, was a city manager, I believe in Michigan, who was posting COVID updates on his Facebook page, and that was the only place that you could get that information. And he blocked a guy who was like, COVID's stupid, I shouldn't have to wear masks, and right? So he blocked him and deleted his posts, but that was the only avenue that the city was putting out COVID information on what you should be doing. And he was using his personal account to do that instead of a formal city account. So that's the best example I can give you. As far as like, you can say things like, I don't think that we should move forward with this project. This project is going to Planning Commission. I disagree.
But you're not on the planning commission.
You're not on
just-
the planning
you're
commission.
the Historical.
You're not involved, right? But if at some point it has to, like, for this example, if it ends up for whatever reason, which feels odd to say this, has to go to HPC2,
That's different.
that's a problem, right? Now we're talking about city business. So I think you have to be you really have to be acting in your thoughtful, but acting as in your role, right? Like, and it doesn't always shake out to like as a commissioner. Like even if you keep things separate, which you should do, you should keep things separate to keep them clean, not intermix them. It can be a fine line. The court, there's a whole test that the court looks at on whether or not it was actually personal, even if you just labeled it personal. You're still allowed to have an opinion, but I think it's the way you go about having the opinion, and trying to influence people if you're in the path of decision making, right? That's the big thing. Or ability to influence a decision that's being made by the city. Like, it's hard to come up with a fact-specific thing on the spot besides the tangible Michigan example. But I think being careful about how you engage on social media as a public official, it goes back to that idea that there's a spotlight on your conduct and you should be thoughtful and transparent in all the spaces that you can. Thank you all for your time. You were very fun. Yes.
One quick question. I've noticed lately, watching the council meetings from home, that council members and staff is on their either little iPad, laptop, cell phone. So I just don't know what is their rules to how that works. It just, from a perspective at home watching it, it just seems a little disrespectful and like that you're not engaged when somebody's taking their time to come to a meeting and you're there on your laptop or your cell phone.
Sure. There aren't any rules that apply to that. I hear you. Like, I can tell you for my office, usually what happens is somebody says something,
yeah,
and we're immediately Googling to see if it's true, to pull up the code so that we can see it for ourselves and be prepared for questions that are coming. I believe some of the council members use the iPads for the agenda versus printing it out, which, right? I know our office does that in some of the cities that we join, so it can depend. But I think acknowledging, like, to the extent staying off your phone and being an engaging listener, it's important. There is a public perception with using technology at the dais. There's a super spotlight when you're up here, right? Like, if when you came up to ask questions, I started texting, it's how to win friends and influence people, right? Like, if you're making eye contact and you're looking at someone and you're not over here and engaging, right? It makes people feel like they're being heard. So I think being thoughtful about that, limiting the use of technology. But council members are maybe doing the same thing, right? Where they're looking something up or they're checking something because it triggered an idea or a memory before they want to say something and contribute. Because I can tell you in Ojai, I've seen in other cities where public comment is like a box that gets checked. Public comment in Ojai is this like very beautiful thing where the community is actually heard and listened to, and there's a response to it. And so I think I lost my point, but there is a lot more engagement with public comment here and being heard. And so I would want to give council and commissioners the benefit of the doubt when you're using technology. They're doing it to move the ball forward and not of like, oh, this lobbyist is texting me or my neighbor or whoever it is, right? But again, if they're texting, it is a public record. So, yeah. Yes.
Well, I was told I couldn't take a binder to my HPC commission meeting. And in my binder, I had like Secretary of the Interior standards, Ojai ordinances, all of these things. It's like this thick, and then all of the previous meetings. And so the binder was like this. And I was told you can't bring that here. You can only bring today's meeting information. Is that correct? Because those things once in a blue moon needs to refer to what exactly is the standard that we're talking about.
So with the legal standards, I don't know why you couldn't bring them. I pull them up digitally when I'm in meetings because I have a pretty good memory. I don't have the code memorized, and the Secretary of Interior standards is its own little special Bible of information, right? And the building code itself
and all the
is,
properties,
I think, as tall as I am. So
all the properties that have been
amassed. So with the meeting information, I think it's being very careful about how that information is used and making sure that it's something like it would have to be appropriate to what the item is on the agenda, right? Like, and in this moment, I can't think of an example, but it goes to not talking about things on the agenda. So like if the meeting minutes of a prior meeting about an issue would inform the decision that you've made on this project previously, first, that should be in the staff report. You shouldn't have to bring the minutes to the meeting. But the reference materials, I don't see an issue with that.
Okay.
And if that comes up again, like, I think it's something that we can talk about offline. Yeah. And work with the staff if that's where that's coming from on some kind of a compromise. Because they might have information that I don't also. But I think at least to the standards that apply to what you're doing, I think it makes sense to have reference materials with you. Okay, you are definitely ethics certified. Thank you for being so thoughtful with your questions and engagement. It's a lot more fun when it's like this and there's a back and forth, and it helps me understand what the issues are for you and that you're actually listening to. So I hope you have a good rest of your day. Thank you for spending time with me. I'll see ya. Thank you, Taylor. Bye.